It's one of the world's most iconic fighters.
This is the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II supersonic all-weather fighter bomber. It's just a badass airplane.
Its nickname, Double Ugly, the Rhino, even the MiG Killer.
It came charging in, didn't ask permission, and said, here we are, who wants to fight?
This is the story of an aircraft that transformed itself.
The F-4 wasn't designed to be a dogfighter. It was designed to be a high-altitude, fast, long-range interceptor.
And inspired an entire generation of pilots.
We needed to hit them hard, hit them fast, and hopefully knock them out as rapidly as possible.
To become the standard by which every fighter of its time would be measured.
When you cheat death, it's pretty nice to come back and live and do it again.
August 1990, Saddam Hussein orders 100,000 Iraqi troops to invade neighboring Kuwait, sparking an international conflict.
Iraq must withdraw from Kuwait completely, immediately, and without condition.
5 months later, the United States leads a military campaign to stop the Iraqi dictator in his tracks. They plan a full-scale air attack. The problem, surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, lots of them, all looking hard for American targets in the skies. Coalition forces need a plane with the firepower and smarts to take these weapons out. The aircraft leading the charge is a 30-year-old warhorse, the F-4 Phantom. Nearly 60,000 pounds of brute force, just over 58 feet long and 38 feet from wing to wing. The F-4 Phantom is a monster.
This is the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II supersonic all-weather fighter bomber. We call it the Double Ugly. It's 2 engines, 2 crew members, and ugly in its own right. It's just a badass airplane.
It's a badass plane with massive amounts of military street cred.
The F-4 has served in all 3 services, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and has virtually been in every role, both air-to-ground, air-to-air. A lot of fighters can only do one thing well. This thing does them all.
Doing it all requires not just 1 crew member, but 2.
The pilot does all the flying and maneuvering, and the weapons system operator does all the radar work and the weapons system.
A choice of weapons made the Phantom one of the most popular assets in the United States arsenal.
The F-4 is a very versatile platform. It can carry radar-guided missiles, air-to-air heat-seeking missiles, harmed anti-radiation missiles, iron bombs, cluster munitions. Pretty much any weapon that's been out there has been hung on the F-4.
The F-4 Phantom is one of the greatest frontline fighters of all time, and it's about to do battle again. January 17th, 1991. Coalition forces roll out an aerial assault over Iraqi military targets. Operation Desert Storm. At Sheikh Issa Air Base, Bahrain, 2 Phantoms prepare to enter the fray.
Our mission that day was to hunt down surface-to-air missiles. We needed to hit them hard, hit them fast, and hopefully knock them out as rapidly as possible.
F-4 pilot Lieutenant Colonel Edward Belanco served in the elite Air Force squad known as the Wild Weasels.
The Wild Weasels were SAM killers, specially modified to take on the surface-to-air missiles.
Being a Wild Weasel isn't for the faint of heart. The job's so dangerous, you have to volunteer for it.
Our plan was to let the surface-to-air missiles see us and not look at the attack airplanes that were coming in behind us, so that we can engage the SAMs before they engage the attack force. Everybody else tries to hide from the SAMs. We tried to make ourselves visible. The motto is first in, last out.
Belanco and his wingman take off. Nearly 300 miles away in Qatar, 8 F-16 Falcons take to the skies too. They'll meet up with the Phantoms near Kuwait.
The F-16s were dropping bombs on the military targets. Our job that day was to take out the surface-to-air missiles so that the F-16s could get in, drop their bombs, and get out safely. It was very critical that we were there.
Bolenko and his wingman monitor the Falcons' progress as they fly. For the mission to succeed, their timing must be perfect.
We wanted to be in and hit the surface-to-air missiles or let the surface-to-air missiles see us before they saw the F-16s. If we screwed up, they could die.
Just outside the combat zone, the Phantoms look for a KC-135 tanker.
We had to take on fuel because we were loaded with 4 HARM missiles. The normal loadout was 2. We carried 4 because we knew the threat density was going to be high.
But the 4 weapons come at a price. They take the place of extra fuel tanks, reducing the Phantom's range to just 300 miles.
We needed the fuel to get up into Kuwait, do the mission, and then get back home.
The refuel should be routine, but immediately, there's a complication. Strong winds blowing over 100 knots.
We're getting blown about 20 miles further south where we had planned to roll out. That equated to about almost 3 minutes behind the time that we had planned.
In peacetime, 3 minutes doesn't seem like much, but in combat, it can mean the difference between life or death.
When I saw that we were behind the time, I knew that this was a problem. I could see the F-16s off to the right, so they were ahead of us and we were supposed to be ahead of them.
Bolenko has to make a choice: finish gassing up or get back on the job.
I said, hey, we need to get going. So we did. We dropped off the tanker. We pushed it up as fast as we could go. We knew it was critical to get in there and keep the F-16s from getting shot down.
The 2 Phantoms speed into Kuwait, racing to catch up with the F-16s. But they may already be too late.
As we get close to the target area, we could see that the SAMs were coming up, a lot of them. We got a pop-up SAM right in the vicinity of their target area, and it came up with a launch indication.
Bolenko's F-4 Wild Weasel is specially designed to sniff out SAMs. It has sophisticated sensors and antennae placed all over its body. They search for enemy surface-to-air missiles radar. The weapons system officer analyzes and identifies these radar signals. Then Bolenko fires an 800-pound anti-radiation missile, or HARM. His goal: to destroy the radar and render its missiles useless. Over Kuwait, Bolenko and his wingman split up and quickly get to work.
Our plan was to divide up the SAMs based on the target area.
Bolenko and his partner confront the SAM that's heading toward the F-16. They only have time to react, not think.
We have about a 10-second window to get the HARM into the air.
Bolenko quickly gets his hand on the pickle button and fires.
The missile came off and it went like a spear towards the SAM.
That's one SAM destroyed, but there's more popping up all around.
So we fired the next one, and in less than 20 seconds, our HARM hit its target.
Bolenko's now used 2 of his 4 weapons, and the threat isn't letting up.
We started looking to the eastern side, and sure enough, we had SAMs come up there. So we had to quickly maneuver in that direction, get a missile off. So we had, in a space of about a minute, we fired 3 missiles.
Bolenko catches his breath and looks to see if the F-16s are on target. He's relieved to see that the fighters are almost home free.
I could see the attack is taking place by the F-16 flight. I saw the bombs going off.
It looks like the strike will go off without a hitch, but then, trouble.
Just then we get a SAM indication that comes up. and gives a launch indication. The SAM was guiding on the F-16. We've got seconds. Keep the attack force alive.
(1991). High over Kuwait, F-4 pilot Lieutenant Colonel Edward Belenko is in the heat of battle. He must protect an F-16, but an Iraqi missile has it firmly in its sights.
The F-16 started a defensive maneuver. He was jinking and putting out chaff. The missile was in the air. He was in a very vulnerable position.
To disable the missile, Belenko must take out its radar now. And he has just one chance to do it.
We have one missile left, and in this case, maybe 20 seconds would be the SAM time of flight before it would kill the airplane. So we turned immediately, put the SAM on the nose, and fired. When our missile hit the SAM radar, the missile no longer had guidance and it was no longer able to follow the airplane. We knew the F-16 was safe.
Belenko and his weapons officer have destroyed 4 Iraqi surface-to-air missile sites in under 2 minutes.
We were fortunate. We got up there, we got our mission done, we got the attack airplanes in and out without having any damage. It was a good feeling.
The F-4 Wild Weasels go on to destroy over 200 Iraqi missile sites, shutting down Iraqi air defenses and making it safe for coalition aircraft.
I was proud to fly the F-4 on Desert Storm, proud of what we accomplished. By doing our job, we saved not only our own lives, but my friends' lives as well.
The F-4 Phantom is no stranger to combat. For over 4 decades, it struck fear into any enemy who dared to challenge it. This legendary aircraft has been a fighter since the day it was born. 1949. The United States and the Soviet Union are in the throes of a bitter Cold War.
The Cold War is this battle over what kind of governments will dominate around the world.
Dr. Lawrence Burke is the Naval Aviation Curator at the National Air and Space Museum.
It's a very tense time where the Soviet Union is looking to expand communism and the US are looking to contain it.
In August of 1949, the stakes get higher. The Russians reveal their brand new atomic bomb. The Pentagon scrambles to adjust to the New World Order, and the U.S. Navy finds itself on the losing side.
Eisenhower comes up with what he calls the new look military that will rely primarily on atomic weapons, and he really cuts down the number of ships in the Navy. It all becomes about delivering nuclear weapons.
Navy planes don't have the range to bring a bomb to the Russians, or to stop a Russian bomber before it attacks.
The Navy is still using a lot of late World War II aircraft, so the F-4U Corsair, Douglas AD-1 Sky Raider, the McDonnell Phantom I. What was adequate for a combat air patrol now has to be pushed much further out to stop the bombers before they get close in. So the Navy is looking for an interceptor, a plane that can quickly rush out, intercept incoming bombers, and shoot them down.
1952, the Pentagon. The Navy Bureau of Aeronautics is desperate for a new aircraft capable of intercepting a nuclear attack. 2 companies jump at the chance to submit a design: Chance Vought and McDonnell Aircraft.
Chance Vought responds with what becomes the F-8U Crusader, and Douglas responds with what becomes the F-3 Demon.
Each looks promising. Single engine, with radar powerful enough to detect faraway bombers and missiles big enough to knock them out of the sky. Each claims an engine that offers speed and power. The Crusader goes with a Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojet engine. It's light and powerful, allowing the jet to be nimble and quick. The Demon takes a gamble on an engine recommended by the Navy, the Westinghouse J40, said to have twice the thrust of any engine in Navy service.
The two companies design their planes, they build these prototypes. They are basically compared against the standard and against each other. And the F-8 Crusader is clearly the much better aircraft. It's much better at this short-range fighter role.
Chance Vaught flies away with a contract for the F-8. It's a bitter defeat for McDonnell. McDonnell is determined to restore its reputation and get the contract they believe is rightfully theirs.
McDonnell does what was known as an unsolicited proposal. The McDonnell engineers went back and said, well, let's improve this design, let's give it twin engines, and let's give it better engines. And let's build a flexible airplane for different missions, really pushing the demands for what a new airplane needs to do.
6 years later, the new plane is ready to make its debut. May 1958, St. Louis, Missouri. McDonnell rolls out its new F4H1 prototype. Immediately, it makes an impression.
It's very different from its ancestry as the Demon. It's a big, bulky airplane. It's got sort of an odd-looking wing. It's flat in the middle with these canted-up wingtips. It's also very different than anything that's been seen to date.
One big difference, the Phantom's wings. They're designed with dihedral or an upward angle.
One of the most interesting characteristics of the F4 is the dihedral on the wingtip, and that's right along the fold line here. It's directly related to the stability of the airplane. For a fighter, you want it to be somewhat unstable for maneuverability, and that's what is accomplished from this.
Its wings give the Phantom maneuverability. Two General Electric J79 engines give it power.
This is one of the two J79 engines on the F4 Phantom. Put about 11,000 pounds thrust in military power, about 17,000 pounds in afterburner. They can propel the airplane to Mach 2.2-ish and push the airplane to altitude at 40,000 feet per minute. Very reliable, strong engine. As a pilot flying the F4 Phantom, it's like driving a 60s muscle car.
The new aircraft seems poised to take the Navy by storm. There's just one thing standing in its way. Again.
Chance Vaught, having had this successful design with the F-8 Crusader, basically decides to update it. They give it a little bit bigger engine, it's a little bit longer, but it's still a single engine, single seat aircraft.
The Navy wants a fly-off. The new and improved F-8 Crusader is ready to rumble. But this time, McDonnell is determined to get the edge. September 1958, Edwards Air Force Base. McDonnell's F4H1 meets its rival for a second fly-off.
It's a close competition. The Crusader is a little bit more nimble, and the pilots like it better, but the Navy sees much more promise in the F4H design. The Navy just ends up giving the contract to McDonnell to develop this into a fleet defense airplane.
The Navy is confident that its new fighter will dominate the skies, and they set out to prove it to the world.
They wanted to demonstrate not only to the US public, but also to the Soviets that we now had this very fast, very capable plane.
The Phantom challenges almost every aviation record in the books and methodically blows them away. In 1959, it sets the world altitude record over 98,000 feet. In 1961, it beats the world speed record, over 1,600 miles per hour. Just 31 months after its first flight, the F-4 is the U.S. Navy's fastest, highest-flying, and longest-range fighter, with 15 world records to its name.
The F-4 early on was a public relations person's dream.
Dick Anderegg was an F-4 pilot and director of the Air Force History and Museums program.
Because of all the power it had, it was able to break all the existing speed records and all the existing time to climb records, far surpassing anything any other aircraft had ever done. This made it very attractive to the public. It made it also very attractive to people in the Defense Department.
One of those people is Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. He thinks the F-4 is the perfect aircraft for not just the Navy, but for the Air Force too.
The Department of Defense was making an effort to try to have the Navy and the Air Force have the same airplane. And they wanted to do this for commonality, as a cost-reducing measure.
The Pentagon quickly finds a use for its brash new fighting plane, Vietnam.
Vietnam is the first time that the F-4 is going to see combat, and it's going to see combat with the Navy, Marines, and Air Force.
It was the big dog on the porch. The F-4 was quite versatile to fill both of the roles of fighter and of attack airplane.
Soon, the Phantom is the most widely used aircraft in the United States military. But halfway around the world, someone else has its eye on the Phantom. NASA. Their plan? To put it on the edge of outer space. In 1965, the F-4 Phantom has been working for American interests in Vietnam for almost a year. In the United States, NASA scientists tap it for another mission: to give America an edge in space. Gemini 4 is NASA's 10th manned spaceflight, and its first attempt at both a multi-day mission and spacewalk.
The 62-orbit flight of the Gemini 4 is a most important connecting link between our first faltering efforts in space and an ultimate landing on the moon.
For this launch, and every launch, there's one moment that always has NASA on edge. This is when the missile carrying the Gemini capsule reaches the point of max Q.
Max Q is the maximum stress on the outer shell of the rocket.
Colonel Jack Petrie was an F-4 pilot for the U.S. Air Force and worked closely with NASA.
And this maximum pressure occurs during the launch sequence. As an aircraft or a missile goes through the speed of sound.
Max Q is an extremely dangerous time. Any flaw in the missile's shell can prove catastrophic. NASA wants to make sure the technology holds up.
They wanted to see if there was any vibration, any shaking, or any abnormalities in the skin of the missile and determine if they needed to make any changes in the missile structure, the speed, the angles of launch.
Engineers come up with an ambitious plan to photograph the missile as it rockets into the stratosphere.
They wanted some close-up photos to see what was happening when this missile went through its maximum aerodynamic pressure.
The only question, how to do it.
You just couldn't get this photography from the ground. And so very quickly they said, well, we're going to use F-4s.
F-4 pilots are up for anything, but chasing a rocket into space is a tall order.
This was an extremely complex intercept maneuver because of the missile altitude, the missile angle, missile velocity, our position.
June 3rd, 1965, Cape Kennedy, Florida. NASA prepares to thrust the Gemini 4 into space. 137 miles away, Petrie and a second F-4 take off from MacDill Air Base.
We had high-speed 35-millimeter cameras mounted underneath each wing of the aircraft. The cameras worked right off the gun switch in the front cockpit. We synced our gun sight with the cameras, and so we knew that we're looking in the right place.
At Cape Kennedy, the countdown is on.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
The two F-4s race toward the Gemini 4. Their timing must be perfect to make the plan work.
From missile launch T0, we're probably about 3.5 minutes to get ourselves in good position.
The Gemini 4 hurtles away from the Earth's atmosphere. Petrie and the other F-4 fly directly at it from either side, at speeds over 700 miles per hour. They must intercept the Gemini below 35,000 feet, the exact moment of max Q.
We pull with the missile, and so we end up almost co-altitude at 35,000 feet as the missile breaks through the sound barrier.
The F-4 soars with the Gemini to 68,000 feet. That's 12 miles straight up.
When we landed, there was a team on the ground, and they instantly downloaded that film and whisked it off.
NASA has its close-up. Petrie's F-4 footage plays a key role in advances in the space program.
Really didn't think too much about that. We were part of this huge step forward into space. We were just focused on getting our airplanes in the right place and helping out NASA.
The Gemini 4 goes on to orbit the Earth 62 times and completes the first American spacewalk.
Okay, I'm out. Okay, he's out. He's close to
paving the way for astronauts to eventually land on the moon. Back on Earth, Petrie's space chase mission shows the world the F-4 can literally keep up with a rocket. While the Phantom rides high in the United States, it's facing another tough challenge halfway across the world. December 14th, 1966, North Vietnam. The United States is a year and a half into a large-scale bombing campaign. Operation Rolling Thunder.
Operation Rolling Thunder was the overarching plan to bomb and attack key targets in North Vietnam.
Retired Rear Admiral Denny Wisely was an F-4 Navy pilot who flew 350 missions during Vietnam.
It was primarily to stop their logistics to the south. We would go after storage facilities. We bombed the power plants in Hanoi, we bombed the power plants in Haiphong, which is the two biggest cities.
Rear Admiral Wisely and 5 other F-4s prepared to take off from the Navy carrier USS Kitty Hawk.
Our mission on that particular day was to bomb the Van Diem truck and storage facility south of Hanoi. The truck and storage facility was roughly the size of 1.5 to 2 city blocks. Each element in the strike group had a specific section of the area to bomb.
The F-4s shoot off the boat and cruise toward land. Every mile of their 100-mile route is littered with North Vietnam's lethal defenses.
They had automatic weapons, they had anti-aircraft guns, and they had the SA-2 guideline surface-to-air missile, which was very formidable. It was a very well-protected target.
Guiding the SA-2s, the deadly Fansong radar. It has the range to track an aircraft up to 75 miles. Wisely's F-4 will know when it has him in its sights.
Our warning devices in the F-4 at that time was this APR-27 that could detect if the missile was actually launched and coming at us.
The only problem, Wisely needs missiles to take out the radar. And he's carrying bombs. His only defense, outfly the enemy missiles. One misstep, and he's as good as dead.
The radar warning system in our airplane started going off. It's doodle, doodle, doodle. and your heart rate's going the same way. We knew a missile was airborne coming at us, but we didn't know where it was coming from. And you don't know which airplane that missile's locked on.
Wisely still has many miles to go before he reaches his target. It's too late to turn back. And even if he did, there's no guarantee he'd make it out alive.
It was just so much stuff coming at us, and there was just surface-to-air missiles everywhere. We maneuvered the airplanes as best we could and just, hope for the best.
High above Vietnam, Phantom pilot Rear Admiral Danny Wisely picks his way through an airspace full of enemy missiles. His goal, to bomb a North Vietnamese military site.
It's over 100 miles, and that doesn't seem like much, but it's a long way when you're getting shot at the whole time. It's amazing how you can be scared silly and so focused at the same time.
Suddenly, hope. Wisely and his partner see that they're close to the target.
It's a hot dog. We're right where we should be. It's just like the photos we had studied before we came on the flight.
Wisely dives down to 4,000 feet and drops his bombs.
$145.
6,000 pounds worth of devastation tears into the ground below.
I dropped 12 500-pound bombs on the target. And then it was a matter of turning back and going right out the same way we came in at 550 knots, which is well over 600 miles an hour, just going like crazy.
2 hours later, Wisely and his partner are back on the carrier.
What kept me alive that day as far as the F-4 is concerned, I think the ability of it to maneuver and the speed it can attain, especially carrying bombs. It's just pretty nice to get the job done and live and do it again.
But as the war in Vietnam rages on, another threat emerges. North Vietnamese fighter planes called MiGs.
The MiGs were designed for close-in dogfighting. The MiGs were also smaller and lighter and much more nimble than the Phantom.
It soon becomes apparent that the MiGs have the edge on the American fighter.
The Phantom was a very fast aircraft, but it's very slow to turn, which means that it's very difficult to get behind a MiG for a good shot.
McDonnell gives the F-4 a major overhaul, hoping to improve it for the reality of war.
There were 4 major versions of the F-4 during the Vietnam conflict. The F-4C, which was basically the Navy version of the airplane, which had no computing power, nothing automatic in it at all. Then the F-4D, which did have a computerized bombing system and a computerized gun sight for air-to-air. Then the F-4E with an internal gun, and then a modified version of the F-4E that had a highly modified wing that gave it better control at low airspeed and high angles of attack.
The new and improved F-4s emerge ready to prove themselves against their North Vietnamese enemies, including the MiGs. April 1972. Udorn Air Force Base, Thailand. A team of Phantom F-4Ds take off on a MiG hunting mission.
Our wing was selected to find and attack and kill MiGs. That was our wing's motto.
Air Force Captain Fred Olmsted was an F-4 pilot with over 300 Vietnam combat missions.
They were very fast, very nimble, very capable adversary. So we were very aware of that. We were cognizant of what the MiG-21 could do if you weren't careful.
Olmsted and the other F-4s soon cross into enemy lines, daring the MiGs to come out and play.
We've got all 4 of our radars pointing in the direction where we feel a threat might be coming. It was worth it to take a look and see if there's any trouble up there, any MiGs that want to cause trouble for our other airplanes in the area.
Olmsted's intuition is right on the money. 2 MiGs appear on the radar, ready to accept the Phantom's challenge.
Right then and there, we knew there was going to be a dogfight. Somebody's going to die, and it's not going to be the Phantoms.
The MiGs flash by, passing at just 1,500 feet. Olmsted quickly turns his Phantom to pursue and attack.
As I'm turning to chase, unbeknownst to any of us, out comes another MiG from below and behind, maneuvering to try and attack me and my wingman. And his intention was to get behind me and my wingman and kill both of us.
Olmsted and his wingman prepare to confront the first 2 MiGs. Another F-4 chases down the third.
I pulled my nose up to get behind him. The MiG leader, he rolled on his back, went straight down right in front of me, and he was gone. He was out of the fight.
The MiG knows better than to face off against the Phantom. But the second MiG isn't as quick.
All of a sudden, the real high G maneuvering ended, and the MiG sort of straightened out and allowed me to get the gun sight right on him, and the missiles locked him right up.
Olmsted quickly sends an AIM-7 off the rails. And it's right on target. Moments later, another F-4 shoots the second MiG down.
The absolute adrenaline exhilaration after a dogfight, being over in enemy territory, shooting your adversary down, and none of your flight mates are threatened and everybody comes home. It's hard to describe it to people that have never been in a dogfight. It's such an accomplished feeling that all of your training has paid off.
By the end of the war, the F-4s shoot down 280 North Vietnamese aircraft. More adversaries than any other fighter.
The F-4 that we started with in Vietnam was nothing like the F-4 that we ended the war in Vietnam. By the end of the war in Vietnam, we did have the right aircraft. And by then, they were doing quite well in the air war.
But by the late 1970s, an unforeseen crisis marks the beginning of the end of the F-4's domination.
Phantom was a very thirsty airplane. And when the fuel crisis hit, it was very difficult to justify keeping it in service, and the services started to look for airplanes that were more fuel efficient. So the Navy began the process of looking for a new airplane, and eventually the F-4s were replaced with F-14 Tomcats.
The Phantoms are simply too costly to keep on the front lines.
Basically, the design at that point was more than 20 years old. After a while, you can only modify it so much.
In the Air Force, new, faster, advanced aircraft start to come online.
The F-15, which was just coming into the inventory then, the F-16, which was about to come into the inventory, and the A-10, which were all going to do the missions that the F-4 did. So that by the late 70s and early 80s, we see the F-4s being retired in great numbers.
A few remaining F-4s go on to fight as Wild Weasels. Others continue as RF-4s, meant for reconnaissance. The majority head to the boneyard. It appears the F-4's service is over. But the Phantom still has one last mission: to go out in a blaze of glory. (1997), Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. The United States Air Force looks for a new plane for its full-scale aerial target program.
The full-scale aerial target program was designed to provide actual fighter-sized targets for missile testing, so we know exactly how they perform. And this allows us to make improvements on the missiles.
The ideal target needs to be large and have the speed and maneuverability to give practicing pilots a run for their money.
You want your aerial targets to have a performance close to what you expect to be shooting at. You can build a dedicated target drone to try to get that, but it's a lot easier to use aircraft that you're retiring.
The Air Force considers other aircraft, but settles on its most legendary fighter, the F-4.
We based the F-4 as our pick because of the large numbers of those that were in storage. And we calculated how long they would last based on our data that we had gotten from previous full-scale air drones.
These planes can still fly. At the same time, the military is getting rid of them. So they're going to be scrapped anyway, and it ends up being much cheaper to turn them into a drone versus trying to build a specialized target drone.
It takes 6 months and $2.6 million to turn a retired F-4 into a QF-4, or flying drone. Technicians retrofit each cockpit with remote system controls for unmanned flight. Typically, a pilot controls the drone from inside a small building. In the air, modern-day aircraft face off with a fully functioning F-4.
The Air Force tries to get every one of its fighter aircraft through that program every 3 years to make sure that things are continuing to work right and that all the systems are the way they're supposed to be.
At the end of most missions, fighter pilots sacrifice the F-4 for the good of the country it so faithfully served.
F-4, you're about to get gunned. Oh, what a beautiful shot.
For some, it's bittersweet seeing such a historic fighter get shot down. For others, it's a fitting end for a fierce warrior.
Seeing these airplanes shot down in this test program doesn't make me sad. I love the airplane because it's contributing to the combat capability of all the generations to follow.
In August 2016, the QF-4 Phantom takes its final flight. Nearly 6 decades after the legendary Phantom made its debut, the last QF-4 drone is shot down over the Gulf of Mexico.
Good mark, drone is destroyed in half.
The F-4's life of service is over. 5,195 Phantoms rolled off the production line, making the F-4 the most popular U.S. supersonic jet ever created. During its heyday, one could argue the Phantom was the ultimate defender of the free world.
Just about every Western country has operated it. Many third world countries have operated it. And it's still finding a lot of use around the world.
For the pilots that flew it, there is simply no better aircraft.
It stood out there and just blew the door down, came charging in, didn't ask permission. Came into Vietnam and said, here we are, who wants to fight?
I was proud to fly the F-4. I have 1,800 hours in it. I wish I'd have gotten more.
It's a Cold War design so ingenious that it could do anything America asked of it.
I think the legacy of the F-4 is that it was a very versatile airplane. We saw it do air-to-air missions, air-to-ground missions, wild weasel missions, full-scale aerial target missions.
The F-4 served as the backbone of the United States military, earning its place as perhaps the greatest aircraft this country has ever seen.